access and all those things using your identity. But on top of that, it is also having a database to store objects. When I say objects, I'm referring to the users, groups, printers, computers, all those things, servers, and so on. All right. So Active Directory is a database where you go and create the identities and you store them. So in the cloud, we have multiple variant of Active Directory. See, in on-premises, it is straightforward, but when it comes to cloud, the Active Directory takes three different shape. In Azure platform, you can either go and install, or you can go and create a domain controller. You can promote a server in Azure VM as a domain controller, and you will have access to the OS, you will have access to the domain controller, you will have a lot of control there. So this is infrastructure as a service. You can do that. Or if you want to go and use Azure AD domain services, this is like a PaaS offering. Okay, where you have control on the Active Directory management. Here you have control on OS and AD. Here you have control only on Active Directory alone. Here you also have a Azure Active Directory. This is a cloud directory. This is something software as a service, where you have access only to manage the identities and so on. So you don't have control on even on the Active Directory part. This is a cloud directory. This is a managed directory service. So Microsoft manages the directory for you. Okay, so this is the high level understanding you should have when someone is asking for a solution. So there are three different solutions that you can look at and provide them the solution that is more appropriate for their use case. So we'll get to discuss these three things in details today. Okay, we'll discuss like the domain controller option. We can discuss the Azure ADDS and the Azure Active Directory stuff. And in the on-premises, maybe you might have had a lot of options, like since we generally use domain controller, the Active Directory actually have various sub-services. Meaning, so Active Directory has domain services. That is what we are primarily discussing about, right? So domain services is where you go and create, manage, modify all those things, the users, groups, computers, OU, domain group policies, etc. Like these are all the general thing that we do. So Active Directory domain services is what we generally practice in on-premises. And besides that, we also have federation services where you go and integrate multiple different directory services. Like you will have a third-party directory, you will have Office 365, you will have on-premises login. So you are integrating Azure AD with on-premises and so on. This is mainly for single sign-on. With if you'll have only one username, but you will be able to access on-premises application. You will be able to access Office 365. You'll be able to access AWS and a lot of different cloud services. So you are using one credential for logging into multiple different applications and resources. So federation services help you to integrate different directories. Okay, and next one is Active Directory certificate services. This is where you go and store all your public key infrastructure, the PKI and the certificates and all those things, and you manage it through Active Directory. This is where you store the certificate and handle it in the on-premises. And we have the Active Directory rights management services. This is for your digital signing, and this is for your data protection and so on. So in an on-premises, we are using it for document protection, or I'd say data protection. In general, like they call it as document protection or information protection and so on. So when you write an email, or when you create a document, or when you create something very critical to the environment, we can go and digitally sign that particular document. It can be a PDF or whatever. So rights management services helps you to do some kind of digital signing and protecting your email or document or information. Without without that digital authentication, you will not be able to access it. Okay, that is one thing. And we also have some other services like lightweight directory services using LDAP protocol. This is mainly for integration to have LDAP browsing and so on. So in a nutshell, we are going to focus mainly on Active Directory domain services. That is where we go and manage users, groups, and so on. This is the focus for our session today, but in the on-premises, you might have heard about all these things, and you might have had experience of working with all those things. But you don't have to worry about too many things. But for identity and access management, so domain services is what is going to play the major role, identity and access management. So you are going to get the identities created in your Active Directory database, and Active Directory is going to manage the login and authentication permissions and so on once after it is created. Okay, so any questions on a very high level? We are going to discuss the entire day about all these things, but I'm just starting with um, the initial understanding. See, if someone is reaching out to you for some Active Directory solution or for some identity solution, there are multiple ways you can suggest them. You can ask them whether they want to have control on the OS, whether they want to have control only on AD and its respective group policy and so on, whether they want to have only identity creates. I mean, this does not give you any kind of control, like it's the least control you will have, but you'll get it for best price, right? So let's see.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
Stan, and
Hmm.
the Azure you have mentioned the promoter server in Azure VM as a
Yeah,
domain controller. So
yeah.
can you explain me? I couldn't understand that.
That's fine. See, you might be aware of it. See, when you go and create a Windows server in on-premises, what you do, you generally go and in the older operating systems like 2008 or 2003, you used to go and run a dcpromo command. Now we are adding the AD domain services role, right? So where it will become a domain controller. Once the computer is installed with Active Directory role, then it is called as a domain controller. So you can go and create a virtual machine with Windows operating system in Azure platform, and you can promote that as a domain controller, meaning you can go and install the AD role inside that. Since you have created the Azure VM, you have full control of the VM, the OS, the database in the sense, the Active Directory database. So all those things you have full control. I'll show
Okay,
you. See,
okay. Yeah,
it's
sure.
it's simple. Don't get too much complicated with that. You go and create a VM, and once after the VM is created, we are just adding the domain controller role.
Control.
So
Okay.
just go and create it. Let's do that. Okay. So anyways, we are going to have it. We have to have it for our lab. So I'll just go and see if there is any resource group for Active Directory. Okay, let me go and create it. Infrastructure as a service, VM, domain controller one. Okay, yeah, this is fine. So sizing and all, it will be based on the number of objects you are going to manage. This will come from the Active Directory team. They will say how much memory, CPU, all those things, disk, all these things, how much is needed will be done by, will be given by the AD design team. Okay, you can select the specific instance size based on their recommendation. Okay, let's go and create it. Okay, while this is happening, I'll also quickly compare. Is there anyone who doesn't know what exactly basic AD and domain controller, all those things? Does everyone have a basic idea? So I'll ask the question other way around.
Yeah,
Is there anyone who
yeah.
does not
We
understand the
have
basics?
basic
Hmm,
idea, but
hmm.
still I don't know much advanced level concept or something. Yeah, I know that the Active Directory and those
Okay,
concepts.
Kanagraj. Okay, that's
Yeah.
fine. That's fine. See, basic is sufficient. So here we are talking about Active Directory, which is a database which will host all the. It's the I can say this is a centralized database. See, earlier before Active Directory came into place, we have to go and create users
Is it
in
less than
each and every
50?
system. Okay, so I don't know. So in earlier days, we have to go and create local users in all computers, servers, and all devices. And then we have to remember hundreds of username and password because we have to create users and credentials in each of the device. But now, after Active Directory came into place, no, it did not come yesterday. It came. It was introduced in late 1990s, where around 1998, 1999 Microsoft introduced all this concept, right? So it is there for almost 23, 24 years now. But Windows 2000 server is the first server where we had all the AD concept or the AD database concept. So we have something called domain controller. Domain controller is the computer or the server that controls the database or that manages the AD database, right? That is the role of the system. The server, when the server has got installed with AD server with AD role installed is called domain controller, I would say. Okay, this is where you go and store all your users, groups. So once after you create the user in the Active Directory, you can use that user to log in into any system that is connected to AD in the network. So this is a simplification of the number of identities you need to create and remember. So once after you have a centralized directory structure or centralized database that can have full control of your environment, you can access application devices and different things using one single credential. So it is like helping you with simplifying the identity and access management, right? So let me just go here. Let me connect. This is not just for the systems administrator, right? Even for the developers also, they can create application. They can have one password, one credential for accessing hundreds of application. We need not, without Active Directory, think about the situation. We need to have applications having inbuilt identity model, and they have to kind of create users and give permissions and so on. So it used to be very tough earlier, but now after all the single sign-on and federation services, you can have one user who can access on-premises application, printer, Office 365, Intune, Salesforce, Workday, or whatever, right? See, I have one ID which I can use for accessing on-premises hosted application, cloud-native applications, and so on. How it is possible using AD Federation or using single sign-on, seamless sign-on, all those technology. Okay, so that is what we are going to discuss now. Okay, how to use one single user to handle access to multiple different uh, on-premises applications, SaaS application, third-party application, and so on. Okay, once after you have the VM created, Kanagraj, so this is where you might have seen it. So what we'll generally do is, in
Okay.
previous version in 2003, 2008, we used to go and run DC promo command, right? Now it is no more available. It is deprecated. In order to promote a server to domain controller, we use this DC promo command, domain controller promotion command. But now it is not available, so it has been deprecated. So now it is added in server manager. So if you want to have Active Directory domain services role installed, you have to go to the manage and install that. I'll come to that shortly.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I know. I think you got it, but you are thinking that is something different, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, like let's do that. So here you can go to add roles and features. Here you can go and select the Active Directory domain services. So these are the 5 different things I was talking about, right? To create certificates and manage it, to create objects, you use Active Directory domain services, and there are 5 different AD roles. But we are, I'm generally talking about this one, where you are simplifying the login concept, where you're simplifying the users doing a single sign-on or access the devices that are in the network, you are using Active Directory domain services. So this is what we are going to focus. Let me see. Yeah. Most of the time, we will also have DNS installed along with your Active Directory. It will have a AD integrated DNS server. Okay, so let me just snip this. So Active Directory is a database that will go and store the information about your users, computers, and whatever devices on the network. It can be a switch or it can be a printer, whatever, right? So we are going to focus on the AD domain services. So this is mainly for enabling single sign-on or seamless sign-on to different devices or application on the network. Okay, let's do that. Let's see here. You can also have a separate online directory. That is what we are going to see today. At the end of the class, we'll also talk about Azure AD. Okay, with Azure AD, it is much more simple. You can access on-prem application. You can access cloud application. When I say cloud application, it is not limited to on-prem. It is mainly to access cloud apps. When I say cloud apps, it can be your SharePoint, Intune, Office 365, your Salesforce. You can access Workday, whatever, right? Time tracking tools and so on. Okay, so let's install that. Okay, so if the installation needs restart, I'm enabling it to restart. It definitely needs restart. Okay, I'll just go and install it. Okay, let me explain. See here. We are talking about two different directory. Okay, see in on premises, if you're talking about the data center, in the data center you'll have a lot of devices, right? You'll have printers, you'll have network appliances, you'll have some third-party applications, all those things. You'll have computers, desktops. So in order to log into all these things, you are using a centralized database. So once the Active Directory database is, I mean, sorry, not okay, on the Active Directory database is created, this Active Directory services will allow you to access all the resources in the network, either a server or computer or a laptop or whatever, and access to printers, access to any application, all these things. So you can have only one database that will hold all the identity, and with that username and password you will be able to access everything on the network. So either it is a um, application or either it is a kind of physical device. Okay, so this is what we used to do in the on-premises, but in the cloud we also have a similar requirement, but it is little different. So in the cloud we have applications, right? We'll have let me just put it like this way. We have Office 365, that is the O365 or Microsoft 365, M365, where it is having a lot of applications, right? It is having SharePoint, Exchange, um, Skype, Teams, a lot of things are there, right? So in order to access that, you need a username and password directory, and similarly in order to access your Workday or third-party applications, you also need some kind of username and password. So for these particular online application, for these kind of cloud applications, we have Microsoft is providing a solution called Azure Active Directory. Okay, Azure Active Directory is a solution where you can go and create username and password and use that for allowing access to cloud applications or cloud native application. So this is a cloud directory. Active Directory is Azure AD is a cloud directory, and it provides access to cloud native application by default. Okay, this is a cloud directory, and we are accessing the cloud native application. Even uh, Microsoft Azure is itself a cloud application, right? Even for accessing that, you can use Azure Active Directory. So Azure Active Directory is not just specifically for Azure. You can use that username and password to access Office 365, CRM, Intune, Workday, Salesforce, or any third-party application for that matter. Any software as a service solution or any cloud native application can be accessed using Azure Active Directory credentials. Similarly, in the on-prem, the Windows Server, some people call this as Windows Server Active Directory because we are promoting the Active Directory on Windows Server. They call it as Windows Server Active Directory. Sorry, they call it as Windows Server Active Directory. Okay, so this Windows Server Active Directory will help you to access the on-premises application. So if you have a on-premises in-house application or home-built application or homegrown application or a database or on-premises SharePoint or on-premises Exchange server. So for accessing all those on-premises application, we use Active Directory, which is a centralized database in the on-premises data center. So now I'll show you how to integrate these things together. Okay, I'll come to that part shortly. So we have two different solutions. One is Azure Active Directory, which is for cloud native applications, and we have Windows Server Active Directory, which is primarily for your on-premises applications, devices, and so on. So now the feature is installed, but we have not promoted that as a domain controller. See, once the feature is installed, you have to go and promote the server to a domain controller. That is the second step. Okay, so now with Windows with this one